This is the first step of making a homemade tensioning device that works on an Ashford. I think this is a 36-inch loom. And so if you've got this kind of loom, this might help you. Well, hello friends. Today we're looking at my Ashford rigid Heddle loom. This has a 7.5 rigid Heddle here. The Heddle is this thing, and the reed are these plastic things in the middle. The holes and the eyes. I don't use the terminology very well because I can't keep it in my head. What we're working on right now is called a tensioning device. And I heard about this on a Facebook group that I'm in about rigid Heddle looms, and decided we would try to construct one of our own. You do this by when the warp is after it's been threaded in, okay, and it's attached to this back stick here, the back warping stick, then you have it threaded through your Heddle, and then you take these rods. This is a 1-inch dowel. These are 1-inch dowels, and they were kind of expensive. The two of them together were $17 at the hardware store. And so I started looking around for something that would work. This is an old dust mop handle, very old. Has the same feel. It's not treated, so it has a little bit of roughness to it. I think I'm going to sand these. And then this is a mop handle that's actually a little bigger than 1 inch. So this one's probably like 7/8 of an inch, and this is maybe a little bit bigger than 1 inch, but as long as they're fairly close in size, I think it'll work. And the idea is that when the warp yarn is coming out of the Heddle here, it goes over one dowel, underneath the next, over the next, and under the next. You're kind of putting it through an obstacle course to create tension, to spread out the yarns. Now, I have one person on that group who said that the tensioning device must be placed between the Heddle and the back roller, okay? Other people have been placing it here. Now, different looms are structured differently. I don't have a lot of space back here on my Ashford. There's really, I mean, if I put those back there, if I lay them on this sidebar, there's actually not room for all 4 of them. If they're elevated, there might be room for all 4 of them. The lady who said that they need to be back there, her point was that it's important for the yarn to be threaded through the Heddle first and separated and made even before you put it into here. I can see her point. If you want these to work as a tensioning device, the yarn really needs to be spread out and even before it gets there. Okay, but these dowels and these things are not going to be laying here. They're going to be on a sidebar. Now, this is where it got really tricky. My husband helped me cut those dowels and such. And he also helped to construct something to lay them on. As you can see, I hope you can see in the video. Yeah, let me turn this just a little bit. On the Ashford, the ends of this side rail are rounded. It'd be really hard to lay anything on there. And at first we wanted to get, my husband had some, this is a pretty hefty piece of wood. We were going to try to lay this on top, and I was going to try to attach it to the bottom of this, like with a clamp. I didn't have a clamp that would work. We were going to use zip ties. I really wasn't sure that it would stay. I felt like the soft edge of this might tend to make it slip off or something. And I don't like to plan for defeat. So I brought my husband in, and he has a problem-solving brain. And the other thing I had tried to do is I have a couple of yardsticks that I use for various things. One of them is a yardstick, one of them is a broken yardstick. And I also, in trying to find some way to attach something over here, I actually tried this. Putting this yardstick is thinner than this one. Putting this yardstick between the edge of this, and this is a block. This is the block that the Heddle sits in. It has 3 different positions, and there's just a teeny bit of space, so that but I didn't want to put too much pressure on my loom. I don't want to put enough pressure that that I'm gonna mess with that block. But when I showed this to my husband, he said he thought he could work with that. Okay, he liked this idea better. So he went down to the hardware store and got four yardsticks because they're free at the hardware store. They'll just give them to you, at least in our county. And he made this. He has a yardstick here, yardstick here. He glued them together. I forget what he used, probably some kind of epoxy. It was very sticky. And then he put a block on the end here so that it's just a cap that sits on top of here. Okay. I wanted to make sure that it didn't interfere with the roller bar on this side. I didn't want it to come down far enough that it would impair that rolling. It needed to not touch the gear on this side. It needs to not interfere with the end of the heddle. It also needs to not interfere with the end of this back warping stick. I mean, there's a lot of things that it can't interfere with in order for things to get rolled up, because this tensioning device is going to be put on the loom after I've tied the warp on, and then it has to be on as you're rolling the warp. That's when it's very important. Then you can take it out and you can go ahead and do your slaying through your eyes. This, I think, is going to be great. I can just pop this on. Now I want to make the point here that, as you see, it's all the way up. What I'm trying to say is it's wider this way and shorter this way, and that's what keeps it from interfering with the roller bar, okay, because it's a little fraction bit shorter in its height than it is in its width. Okay, now I haven't used this yet, so we're going to hope for the best. It's a tight fit, but when I put it, and I did label them, this says right side, this says left side. You kind of have to wedge them in. And then, all right, I haven't done this before. I'm wondering if I have room for them on the back. This is the thing that the yard would have to go through the heddle and go through there, all the rollers, and then have to attach to the back stick. I'm not sure if there's enough space for that, especially between the heddle and this first roller. The thing I'm trying to accomplish here, and I'll just put a picture of this, is along the back warping stick. I want a tight, nice, flat lay of warp strings back there. I want it to look pretty like all the other weavers. Mine always ends up being this horrible bunch of knots and strings crossing over each other instead of each one in its place. And I think that all of that gives for a better warp up. Now I'm going to cut my warp off at the other end down there, and I'm going to experiment with my tensioning device. Okay, friends, I'm fixing to put the tensioning device on, and I wanted to put the camera in a position so you can see it. When I cut off my warp threads, they're just hanging down here over this front roller. This is my back roller, and this is my back warping stick. You'll notice there's not a lot of space in there, and this is this is the frame that my rollers are going to rest on. I have 4 rollers, and I've been looking at the instructions in my group, and the first one says to put the roller that's closest to the back warping stick underneath. Wondering if I should have sanded these more. We'll see. I'm also going to roll that back warping stick some so I can have a little more space. And I am going to straighten all of these. Oh shoot. I think I better, before I start pulling those, I better tie them again. Now before I started messing with these strings very much, I went ahead and tied them off here so that I couldn't do too much damage to my warp lengths. So I really want these to be nice and tidy. I would love for them to be nice and straight. And I may spend some time straightening them out. Okay, that looks pretty good. So the first one is there, and then I'm going to put the second one under as well. So now I have 2 under. Now these are dowel rods that were purchased at the hardware store, and my husband cut them to length So they are kind of a little scratchy. And he did sand them. He sanded the ends and he sanded the rods, but they, of course, could be sanded more. I may be being over finicky, but I tell you, I've had so many bad warps in my life that I would really love to have one beautiful success. Just one. Just one. All right. Now I think I'll put this one. This one goes on top. This is a smaller, probably like a 7/8 or maybe in a 3/4. And then this one's actually a bit larger. This was a mop handle. Now you see how they're all four resting on there. Oh, I'm so excited. Now, of course, they're rather loose. And so what you have to do is, let's look down at this end. It's a little closer to where you are. What you have to do is you have to secure each rod to this base that it sits on. I'm going to do that this time with ponytail holders and see how that works. See if they're secure enough. Okay, now the way this is working so far is I am just raising this up a little bit. This one should be easier because it's laying on top. And you slip it onto the roller. Now this one's going to be tighter even. And you grab it and pull it underneath and do that. And so far, these ponytail holders are quite snug. I have two daughters who are now in their 20s. However, as it is with daughters, over the years I've probably about several hundred of these ponytail elastics at the store. That one's a little bit looser. These brown ones are very nice and snug. Oh, I'm so excited about this. I think this is going to improve my warping no end. Okay, so I now need to go hunt in my daughter's room for 4 more of these. Then I can do the other end down there. And then I'm so excited to start warping. Well, in spite of searching my daughter's bedroom, which is a terrifying adventure in its own right, I still only found 1 more ponytail. So I've got these 2 ponytails and I'm going to have to do rubber bands on the others. So let's see how this end goes. I like that you can just slip them on there and then pull them under. The depth of a yardstick is not very deep. Let's put this one on the other end. Make those nice and tight. All right, now let's try. This is a rubber band from the vegetables at the grocery store. I keep those because, you know, I'm of that slightly older generation that keeps everything. Yeah, even though these aren't all the same, I think they're all going to be snug enough. We'll see once we start putting tension on that warp. And then here's another little pink grocery store band. Hope none of this destroys my yardsticks. But because the yardsticks were free, it's not a big deal. Okay, now I'm going to take a second and fiddle with this warp, and I'm not going to make you watch me do that. Okay, I didn't do much fiddling because I don't know what I'm doing anyway. But I do know that one main goal is to keep these rollers close together without much space in between them, because I asked my husband, who understands science. He said the tension in the warp strings is developed by the curve from one to the next, okay? And of course, that's also improved by keeping them tight together. Now, I should be able to roll this warp up beautifully simply by holding it with one hand and rolling this bar with the other. See, I see what she means about the tension that's already back there is pulling this roller toward the back stick, and I can see where a zip tie would be useful. So I'm going to try to do that. Actually, I bet I could put it this way. Whoa. We went and bought a whole bag of zip ties the other day in anticipation of needing lots of them for this project, which we haven't, I'm glad to say. All right, now that did, the gear loosened, and that lost some of it, and I think I lost my little, yeah. That's another thing. This is an Ashford loom, and I've had it for 5 or 6 years now. But I would say the gears, they're plastic. They just don't seem to catch as well. Every now and then they'll give way. Yeah, the hand down here doesn't really have to do anything except for just hold the yarn. There is tension being accumulated, and I appreciate the lady on the group who said that the Heddle combs the yarn and places it perfectly, so that if you look here along this, none of them are overlapping. They're beautifully spaced, and they continue that way here. In addition to tension, nice flat placement, I think, is another thing you're looking for. Well, I like this so far. Okay. Wow, and so you can just stop and not worry about it. I like to put those little cardboard bands right where the warping stick meets the roller. It is shifting more that way. The thing is, yeah, that's interesting. My husband did put at the ends down here in the corners, he constructed this as a little box. It's a box with a nice flat end, so it will catch here. And I'm so glad it's on this end, because as the warp goes up that way, it's going to keep this frame from slipping. So I should be able to, yeah, that should hold it right there. Good, good, good. All right, let's continue. The thing that's slipping is the entire loom is resting in a dresser drawer, because I have difficulty finding a location to warp up in. And that's the biggest issue. Right there. Like some of you, when I'm weaving, especially if it's a weave I don't like very much and I'm desperate to get to the end, I'm always waiting for that first little cardboard strip to fall through. I love it that I don't have to create the tension with my hand pulling on this yarn down here, because then it's pulling against my hand up here, and I'm actually creating tension in my body from one hand to the other. The tension is residing in those rollers. I do wish I had a better location for warping up. I used to do it on the dining room table, but our dining room table's not really long enough, and if I attach the peg to you know, some other piece of furniture, it invariably would pop off and just ruin my warp. And that was distressing. All right, for all of you rigid Heddle people out there, this is my first time using this homemade tensioning device, and I've carefully studied out the document, the PDF that's located in the files section of the Facebook group, Rigid Heddle Weaving, I think it is, or Rigid Heddle Loom Weaving. And there's a lady whose name I have forgotten already, of course, who took the photographs, did a blog post too. If I can find it, I'll put a link down below on this video. So even if I have an edge over here, which I do, that's kind of loose, it's going to still give it tension in the rollers, and I don't have to always be grabbing it. My poor husband used to help me warp up. I think he's hoping his days of doing that are over, because he was constantly scrambling like a groom with a bunch of horses, trying to grab any reins that were loose. All right. Make sure I leave the right amount for tying off down here. I can adjust that later. That looks pretty good. Okay, she did say that she keeps the rollers in when she does the first little bit of slaying, just the first few eyes And then she takes the tensioning device out completely and finishes her slaying and ties it to the front warping stick. Okay? I hope that that's helpful. I hope that's enough information. I'll take a few photos now so you can see a little close up. So here's this weave so far. I am so happy with it. The bamboo on the warp, the way the warp feels, the way the heddle comes down, the way the reed goes through this, it's just beautiful. It's as smooth as butter. And compared to that last weave, oh my. So the weaving is going great. I started off, because I had quite a bit of the green left over after warping, I started off with a band of green. And then here's my other color I'm using. This is an acrylic, I'm pretty sure. And after I had done a few rows, I thought, you know, I don't want the whole scarf to look like this with just another green band in the bottom. So I'm going to do what's called clasped weft. The two yarns flip places and they grab each other. They clasp each other in the middle of the shed. And you can do it anywhere you like along here and end up with this zigzag. It's a very creative way to weave. So you'll see more of that as we go along. Okay, I thought I'd show you a little bit more of this weave as I move up closer to the heddle, and then I'll advance it and show you what that looks like. But here's a little bit more of this clasped weft. I love how easy it is to just pull that yarn through. The hardest thing about this is not getting your yarns all tangled up, and I do this all the time because I really don't weave that often, so I'm constantly getting my yarns tangled. I especially tend to get them tangled around the cardboard strips here at the bottom. I'm slowly getting a little bit more green in for a while. Oh, got that too tight. You can probably see that this side is very slowly starting to get taller than this side. That's because the green yarn is slightly wider. It's a number 3. I think this might be a 2 weight. And so over time, it tends to get a little bit wonky. And so what I'll do is I'll stop, I'll reverse the colors, and I'll put the green on this side. And I'll show you, let me try to do that. I do this various ways, but let's do this. I don't like to run them both all the way across because that looks kind of funny. If I just swap places with them, it gives this like line in the middle of the clasp weft that I kind of don't like. I don't mind it with one of them. I don't mind it with 2. So I'm going to go ahead and run my green all the way across. And did you see how when I snip that, it just disappears? You don't want to knot your threads in the middle. Okay. So now this will transfer to this side, and I'll use it as my primary. And I'll be able to build this selvage up again a little bit. Okay. But if I had done a good job in selecting, a better job in selecting my yarns and had picked ones that had exactly the same weight, I wouldn't be going through that.
Now again, I'm starting with a loose end on this one. Actually, it's just easier to take your end and stick it through there. I don't know why I didn't do that. And I'll pull it through for a fairly short end there. Okay. And then I'll just keep on going as I did before, but I'll just use my green. This might be easier because you don't do much with your primary when you stick through. You just pass it through the shed and pull it back. This is the one that you have to manipulate so much, so it might be better to have your smaller shuttle be that way. And it won't take very long before this side builds up again. I adore working with this bamboo. It is just so soft. And as I understand it, because of that, it also gives your work a beautiful drape. See, I love that look. Again, so creative. I try to remember when I get done with one shuttle to put it toward the back, closer to my body, so that, and the other one will be on top. But if you only have two, it's not a big deal. Okay, I've gotten far enough now I can probably pull my work down. I want to show you. Oh, I forgot to put this back. I have to put this in the resting position. I do that a lot. Actually, but that even springs my tension loose even more. And you see it still remains straight. So I have to pull it down there. And even when I pull it tight, look how straight across that is. This is what excites me about that tensioning device. It is absolutely wonderful. Even using a class weft where there are two different weights, it still keeps everything so nice and straight. Hope you can see that there.